Hello, everyone. Thank you so very much for joining us today here at the Spectrum Group. My name is Randy Wostratzky. For a little background, as everyone who knows Spectrum realizes, we work with wealthy investors from the East Coast to the West Coast, from the North to the South. And traditionally, we analyze our data on a widespread scale, meaning that we don't do much of a regional breakdown of where these investors come from, where they live, and how that may or may not have an influence on the way that they manage their financial blueprint. So we've been doing some work recently highlighting these various regional breakdowns of wealthy investors and have looked at whether or not there are differences based on the region they come from that have an impact, again, on the way that these wealthy folks manage their finances. So you can see the 5 regions here being the Northeast, South, Midwest, Mountain West, and Pacific regions. So these are the 5 distinct areas that we're looking at across the country. Coming up here in the next couple of weeks, we are going to be publishing separate research reports for each of the regions, as well as an all-encompassing summary report that will break down comparisons and contrast metrics across the different regions. But just a couple of different examples we wanted to review today. So here's a slide that talks about the demographics of the Midwest. So you can see, going from left to right, what the age breakdown is across the 4 main four main age segments. Looking at those that are retired at 54%, those that are working at 37%, and then semi-retired at 8%. We're looking at about 2/3 male, 1/3 female, approximately, in the gender breakdown. And then this is pretty distinct from a political party standpoint, where you see a 41% Republican, 26% Democrat, and then a third that identify as independents from a political standpoint. Here we're looking at equity ownership. So folks in the Midwest on the left-hand side of your screen, represented by the green color, compared to the total number of respondents. And here you can see it is very similar across the board as far as how the wealthy investors in the Midwest compare to the total United States wealthy population relative to the percentage of respondents that own equity products in the various categories seen here. The highest percentage difference is only 2% there at the bottom of the screen relative to the total amount of investors that own domestic ETFs at 31%, and the Midwest with just under 30%. But then on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the average, the mean value of each of the holdings in the various investment categories. And this is where you start to see some differences. So taking a look at the stocks at the highest on the Pacific, where you have almost a mean average of 580,000, compare that to the Mountain West that has a mean average of almost $100,000 less at 490,000. Same thing below that, taking a look at stock mutual funds, where the Mountain West has 518,000, and then the South only has $416,000 as a total mean. And then going down even to the bottom of the screen there at the domestic ETF category, where you see the Mountain West region again significantly higher than the other areas, and over $50,000 higher on average than the total of the 5 different regions throughout the country. Another thing that we looked at is some perceptions that these wealthy investors have relative to wealth management, and asking them various questions about the perceptions they have of whether or not they kind of deserve this type of service, whether it's something that they feel is expensive. And you can see here the biggest difference being that first bullet point about whether or not it's for people that are richer than they are. And 35% of those in the Midwest say that is indeed the case, as opposed to 30% of the overall respondents. Other than that, it is fairly close across the board on the 5 other questions that we surveyed, with the only other significant one over a percentage point there down at the bottom, where you have 38% of all regional respondents saying that they know enough to do their own wealth management, as opposed to 36% from the Midwest. Looking now at the Northeast demographics, you can see here from an age standpoint, the breakdown is very similar, as is the retirement status, as is the gender. But looking at the political party here, this is a very stark contrast to the 41% of Republicans and 26% of Democrats that we had when we looked at the Midwest, where you see almost an even split here among Republicans and Democrats in the Northeast, and then an increase of 5% from 33% in the Midwest to 38% in the Northeast who say that they are independents. Here you see comparisons, again, across all regional respondents to those in the Northeast, which is shown in that lighter blue color there. You do see, on the whole, typically those in the Northeast have a larger worry about these different concerns than their counterparts in other regions, even starting with there at the top left of the screen with the health of their spouse. You see a almost 10% difference in the Northeast versus all regions in the worry about having someone to care for them in their old age. Same thing, almost 10% on the bottom left-hand side of being able to retire when they want to. And even on the right-hand side, you normally are looking at anywhere from a couple percentage points all the way up to 7% difference in themselves or their spouse being forced into an early retirement before they're actually ready, with the only time that you see all regions worrying a little bit more than the Northeast with that last bullet point about having enough money to leave to children and grandchildren. And taking a look at video usage, what you can see here is that whether or not you watch financial videos on a website, or pardon me, watch videos on a financial website, the Northeast versus all regions, identical at 36%. But where are they going to take a look at these? You can see that on average across all regions, we have over 50% that say they're going to websites of major media companies, as opposed to only 48% of those in the Northeast. Whereas in the Northeast, you have a little bit more likely for them to go on Facebook to watch videos, and 3% more likely to go to a place like Twitter to watch videos of financial websites. A lot of this data you can get by subscribing to our Wealthy Investor series using our proprietary visual analytics technology, which would allow you to leverage the various different regional areas that you can analyze our data from. Here are some of the reports that we're publishing this year that we've already finalized that first report on attitudes and behaviors, and we're certainly close to publishing that second report on communicating with advisors and with providers. So if there's anyone that has an interest in discussing our Wealthy Investor series and the analytics platform, I would certainly welcome that conversation.